Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you could join us this evening. This is a special education webinar called Back to School Boot Camp for Elementary School Families. My name is Suzanne Mason. I'm the Resource Manager and Event Coordinator for the Howard County Autism Society. So a recording of the webinar, along with materials provided by our presenter, will be posted to our website within the next few days. You'll receive an email once the video and materials are posted, along with the links. We'll also be sending around a survey that we hope you'll complete. It'll just take a few minutes. Any questions or comments that you have for our presenter can be put into the chat. So I welcome you to open your chat and get ready to do that so you can enter them as they come up. If you submitted a question when you registered for the webinar, we have shared those with the presenter. And so hopefully she'll be able to address those for you tonight. I've entered a message about closed captioning into the chat. For those of you who would like to access them, you need to click on More and the ellipses and select Enable Transcription. And if you do not want closed captioning, then you can go to More and you can disable transcription. Okay. We're offering, hopefully, simultaneous Spanish interpretation for Spanish speakers tonight. I'd like to introduce our interpreter, Sylvia Maldonado from Luminous, who will provide instructions in Spanish on accessing this feature. Sylvia, are you ready to go? Let's see. Yes, you are ready to go. I see that. You're just covered up on the other screen. Okay, what I'm going to do is start explaining the instructions and Sylvia will interpret them as we go. If you would like to access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe at the bottom center of the screen and then click on Spanish. Once you're on the Spanish channel, you will hear the interpreter at 80% and the presenter just at 20%. Please go ahead and access that channel at this time and let us know if you have any difficulty. Sylvia, let me know when you're ready for us to proceed. Okay, wonderful. I ask everyone to keep your cameras off and to remain muted during the presentation. You may put questions in the chat and we hope we'll have time to address those at the end of the presentation. At this time, I'd like to welcome back our presenter, Beth Benavides, and thank her for sharing her knowledge and time with our community. Beth is Director of Outreach for the Hussman Institute for Autism and also serves as a special education consultant for HCAS. She serves on several state and local councils that are devoted to improving services and present numerous trainings on autism for educators, clinicians, law enforcement, parents, school systems, businesses, and community partners. Beth is a certified special education advocate and member of the Council on Parent Attorneys and Advocates. Most importantly, she is the mom of a young adult with autism. Beth, welcome. Glad to have you back with us.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here as we look to a new school year. We offered this boot camp last year and got positive feedback, so we're offering it again as we look ahead. A new school year means a new grade and new teachers and goals, and maybe for some of our kids, even a new school. So to help your child be most successful and to relieve some of your own parent jitters, we thought it might be helpful to just provide a few tips on what's most important to help with the transition back to school, and what's most important to communicate with teachers before school starts, and even during the first few weeks of school. As Suzanne mentioned, I go by Beth. I work for the Hussman Institute for Autism and also provide services to the Howard County Autism Society. And my son Kyle is 23 and with autism, and he exited school at 21 from Marysville High School. So my first bit of advice, and I know it always seems easier said than done, is not to panic. One way to relieve some stress is to take the time this week before school starts to get your things in order. What I'm going to share tonight isn't rocket science. It's practical advice from parents, teachers, and administrators. So there's still time to get organized. There's still time to review the IEP, to create a communication log, to share information, to ask those questions that you have, and to get involved in your school community. We have resources on our own website. They were from last year. We've updated them with a few for this year. The Howard County School System has information on its website for back to school. And there's a great website that is funded by WIDA, the public television station in Washington, D.C., and that receives funding from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. It's called Reading Rocket. And that's another really great website to check out for some good advice. So before we get to what to communicate and with whom, let's talk about getting organized. In our world of special education, parents know there is a lot of paperwork. And in helping parents, I found that parents who have their documents organized actually feel more organized and better informed. So if you're someone who loves organizing, consider creating a binder just for this school year. You'll have the IEP, your progress notes, data, report cards, communications with teachers, meeting notices, even some papers that your child brings home, all in one place and in sequential order. And if doing that for some of us is really rewarding, for others, it could create more pressure and it could be more stressful than helpful. So for those of us that may feel more stressful, then consider just a folder for the year to keep the IEP, notes, and communications all in one place. I'd also suggest a separate email folder for all of the received and sent messages to be collected in one place just for this year. So you might label that folder School 2022, and all your communications will be kept in there. What's most important is just to choose a system that works for you, and that way you'll be more likely to use it. This is an example of a communication log from understood.org. I will have a couple different slides in here from this website because it's an excellent website. It is for parents of kids with disabilities, and it has just some really great free downloadable pages that really can be great in that organizational binder or in communicating with the school. This is just a communication log to help you keep track of phone, email, letters, an in-person meeting. I think this is just great to have, whether you create it yourself or use this one, but it really does allow you to keep track of all those emails and all those communications. This is another simple one that some parents like, where again, same idea. It's who's contacting whom, how you're contacting, what the concern was, notes from your conversation, just anything to help you keep track of all of those conversations that you're having. So what is so important about your communications is that it helps us keep track of the conversation. We're not guessing who said what or whose idea it was to implement this or that. If we've asked for a meeting, it allows us to track time on how much time it's taking for that meeting to take place. So That's why we, always suggest that you keep track of the conversation. Decide what is most important to communicate. You don't have to communicate every thought that comes into your head. So think about what's most important. Be succinct. Always start out with what you're writing about, not this long email, and then you get to it after 3 paragraphs. In your first sentence, the teacher should know what you're emailing about. And don't overwhelm teachers with daily email. I have some parents who email their teachers night and day, all hours of the night when a thought pops into their head. Really respect the time that teachers are working. So if you want to draft an email, fine, draft it at 4 o'clock in the morning, but don't hit send until 8 o'clock in the morning. So really think carefully about what their professional day is, and respect that they too have families and they too have lives outside of teaching. And so that communication with you really should be within that school day. And then always follow up after the phone conversation to document what you discussed. So if you have a conversation with a teacher and you have agreed to, a communication log of some sort back and forth with the teacher, a simple email that says, thank you so much for our conversation today. I look forward to the communication log being implemented by the end of the week as we discussed. Again, that helps you keep track of the conversation, and it just makes sure that you're on the same page with what you discussed with the teacher. Review your child's current IEP. This is the week to do it. So parents, pull it out, dust it off, take a good look through it. The cornerstone of your child's educational program is the IEP. This is individualized. It's just as important for you as the parent to know what is in that IEP as it is for the teachers. This program guarantees that the services and supplementary aid, accommodations, and modifications that your child needs, they'll actually receive. So you think of this IEP as a contract. What I want you to look at on the IEP is the important date, the present levels in the IEP, so where your child was when that IEP was written, what their present levels were, and their current needs, where they are today when they head back to school. Do those goals still fit? And are the accommodations up to date? Is there anything else that we might need to look at adding? So when I talk about important dates, on the front page of your child's IEP, at the bottom right-hand corner, you will see this block. It shows the first arrow that I have there is your IEP annual review date. So know when that is. Put that on your calendar. So for some kids, it's going to be March 30th. For others, it might be October 10th. Whatever that annual review date is, you want to know when it's coming up. The other dates that I want you to look at are the annual review date, again, for this school year. So you'll see what the date is, put that on the calendar. The evaluation date, when was your child last evaluated? So every 3 years, your child can be evaluated, and this is a conversation that you have with the school as to whether your child needs to be reevaluated. This is called the Triennial Evaluation, and you should know when that is. That date is always on there. You'll see in this example, the most recent evaluation date was March 2nd, 2021. So 3 years, the next evaluation date is going to be March 2nd, 2024. This does not mean you have to wait until 2024. If you feel there are new diagnostic questions, or you feel that you want to have something else evaluated, that the evaluation data is out of date, you can always ask for an evaluation early, and that is an IEP team decision. You'll come together with the IEP team and make a determination as to whether you move forward with the evaluation early. Okay. The second section is your present levels. So when the IEP is drafted, and then when sure that you know where your child's present levels are. You want to make sure you know how they're heading into the school year. The next section to look at is the supplementary aid section. This is section 3. And you're going to want to pay attention to the instructional supports that are listed, to the program modifications, to the social behavior supports that are listed, and a physical environmental support. I don't know about you, but my son's IEP always included a long list of accommodations. And it was really important for me to know what he should have so that if he came home and was having a bad day, I could say, did you remember to give him his sensory break? Did you remember to give him his fidgets? Did you remember to give him his earphones or whatever it was that he may have needed? It's helpful for me to remind myself of all the things that should be in place for him when the new school year begins. So that's why looking at this section is just as important for you as it is for the teachers. I hear many parents say, I don't even know if my teacher looked at my child's IEP before the school year started. Well, make sure you as a parent also took time to look at the IEP before the school year started, so that you know what you're asking for, you know what you're calling to mind for them to look for and what's most important to you. The first question is, are agreed upon accommodations in place? If accommodations are not provided, students are not receiving aid. This is the part of section 3 of greatest importance when it comes to specifying what your child needs on the day-to-day. Supplementary aids and services provide the individualization of supports that allows your child to access and benefit from aid and to participate in a least restrictive environment. Accommodations and supplementary aids are not gifts, and they don't need to be earned. They're based on your child's assessed needs. They're responsible for providing them. As a reminder, accommodations are different than modification. Accommodations provide access to the same material, environment, and activities as everyone else. They provide a workaround the disability. Whereas modifications, on the other hand, change what is being taught or what is expected. So it's important to know the difference, and they are listed differently in that section 3. They both appear, accommodations and program modifications, in section 3. Many parents will ask me, well, what accommodations can I ask for? What accommodations can he have? It's not a matter of can he have them, it's a matter of does he need them? Does he or she need them? This is the manual that's on the Maryland Learning Links, the MST, the Maryland State Department of Education's website. It's a manual that explains accommodation. And so I often will direct parents here to get an idea of just different categories of accommodations that may be helpful. But it's not really a matter of just adding in every accommodation you can think of. It's really looking at what your child's needs are, and with the team deciding what supplementary aids, what things are going to be most helpful for your child in succeeding in that least restrictive environment. Next question is, does the IEP fit your child's current needs? So the IEP identifies special education and related service supports needed for a student with a disability. Are there revisions that are necessary? It's a new school year. If you believe the current IEP needs revision, then you may request an IEP meeting. Remember, IEP meetings are not just once a year. You can request an IEP meeting anytime you feel that one is necessary to discuss with the team revisions or updates or progress regarding your child. An interim IEP meeting is usually held 45 to 60 days after the school year begins. This may be especially helpful to schedule in advance. If you know you're going to want to meet with the team, especially for children that are transitioning from preschool to kindergarten, or from kindergarten to first grade, or maybe third to fourth, where those big leaps are, it's really important, I think, to just have an interim IEP meeting with the team to come together to make sure the accommodations that are listed are still applicable and they're still being used, they're still beneficial. To also look at the progress that's being made and whether any of the goals need to be revised or increased, anything like that. So an interim review is a good idea. You just want to ask for it early to get on the calendar because the school calendar certainly gets packed up for teachers early on. And as you know, each school has an IEP day, so you want to get on that schedule if you feel an interim meeting would be helpful. So communicating with teachers, what to communicate, how, when, and with whom. These are questions I get all the time, and I really think it's helpful for parents to think about these things. So what to communicate to the teachers? It's fine to send an introductory letter to the teacher, but don't send a whole manual and a binder about your child and a 15-page PowerPoint about your child. Let's not overwhelm them with this initially. I would narrow down that introductory letter to the teacher with about the top 5 things, the most important things for the teacher to know that first week. And really not only what those things are, but why it's important for the teacher to know these things, especially if something has changed at home, if there's something new going on at home that you think is important for the teachers to know and might be affecting your child's social emotional needs. It might be describing how your child's disability is affecting them. So you can provide just specifics on that. I know for many of our kids with autism, one day is not the same as the next, and one school year is not the same as the next, and what we might be dealing with. So it's important, if you feel there are updates or things that the teacher should know, that would be important to share. If there are accommodations, when you look at that IEP, if there are accommodations that you say, oh my gosh, this one is absolutely essential. I have to make sure that my child has this on that very first day of school. It's fine to highlight a few of them. We expect that teachers are looking at IEPs, but if there's something that you really, really want to point out, if there's something you're curious about, if your child has close adult support on their IEP as an accommodation, and you want to know, what does that look like? What should I expect that first week of school? Not for the whole school year, but that first week of school, what do you have in place? What kind of support should he expect? That is all fair for you to ask. It's fair for you to know what your child is walking into on that first day of school. And then again, as I said, anything that's going on at home that you feel might affect your child's learning, all of that is really good to communicate. Another sheet that you can find on understood.org is this 3x3x3. So it's 3 of your child's strengths, 3 areas that or 3 things that your child needs help with. My child is going to need help unpacking their backpack. My child's going to need help going to the bathroom. My child's going to need help getting onto the playground, whatever that is, or interacting with peers or responding to a theme. And then some strategies that work. So if there's something at home that you're doing to, decrease his anxiety or help her sit for a matter of time, whatever strategies you think might be helpful, share those with the teachers. You're not going in and telling the teachers how to teach or how to run their classrooms. You're just thinking about a few little strategies that you use that are especially helpful for your child. So brush that works really great with my child, or whatever it is. Just, we all have our little things that we do with our kids that work. So these things you can share on that kind of a form. This is another really good form. Last year, we talked a lot about our children's experience with hybrid or distance learning, and this form may still be relevant to some families that continued with distance learning last year, or whose children struggled with that return from hybrid or distance learning. So this form is also on understood.org. It's a great form to say, again, some of the same things that other form did, but really specific to maybe what the challenges were during the last year. Another example, this, could be for younger children especially, but again, there's a couple different versions here. There's one obviously for younger children, one maybe that you would use for older children, but some ideas all on understood.org that you can print out and fill out and send in early. These are just great because you're not sending like this, again, huge long list of things. You're really using these forms that are succinct, they're bulleted. Teachers love bullets. They love just the highlights. They want to look at it quickly and know and hear you. So, really think carefully about that as opposed to writing long narratives. When I asked a few teachers what was helpful, what they thought was helpful, one teacher said, share the little things that you do for the child at home. For example, if the student needs help with toileting or opening food items, or if there are any sign approximations that would be helpful for the staff to understand, share those in advance. Another teacher said, share prompts that are helpful, whether they're verbal, visual, or gestural. Share social stories and strategies that are helpful. The point here is they just want you to share what will be helpful to them. to communicate. Again, as I mentioned, email is great, respecting the time that you send your email. Phone for sensitive conversations. Informal meetings are fine, and IEP meeting. It's good early on to ask your child's case manager or general education teacher how they generally prefer to be contacted and how quickly parents can expect a reply. So if you ask, your teacher might send out in advance in their own welcome letter. It's the same for all students. I reply within 24 hours, but know what that expectation is, or know what you should expect and what's fair. So again, if you want to ask them ahead of time, should I expect a reply in 24 or 48 hours? Do you need a whole week? Let's be reasonable, but what is it? And then again, any phone conversations, make sure you follow up with an email just so that you are keeping track of what you discussed. Again, very brief. Thank you for the call today to discuss Johnny's new sensor toy, whatever it is. When to communicate? Communicate early. So I'd say touch base by this Thursday, so that the teacher can respond if necessary on Friday before school starts. If you have questions or concerns after the first day of school, it's okay to ask them. We all know that the first week of school is going to have bumps for our kids and our parents and our teachers. We know that there are difficulties with staffing right now, so some temporary staff might be in place. We just want to make sure that we are asking questions when we have them. We're not waiting to communicate until there's a crisis. That we're being, I always say, realistic and reasonable, but also responsible. So if there are things that you need to know, if you do not know who your child's case manager is going to be, if you don't know who their special educator is or their general educator at this point, you can always look on the school website or call the school and ask for the instructional team leader for special education. That person knows all the assignments by this point, and that person can be your go-to until you know who that teacher is. With whom to communicate? Direct your email to the child's teacher instead of group emails initially. So, a lot of us will send emails to every person that has anything to do with our child so that all 14 people hear the same thing. And that makes it really hard because while everybody's hearing the same information, you're also assuming that all 14 people are going to respond to you, and those 14 people are all assuming somebody else is responding to you, and they don't have to. So if you want a direct response from someone, then please, I suggest directly emailing that teacher, that special educator first. Always communicate with your child's general educator as well as the special educator. So keep in mind, your child is a general education student first. So if they have a homeroom, if they have, a general education teacher of any kind, make sure that you're also communicating with them. Make sure that general educator knows you and knows your child. If you do communicate with the general educator, then I always suggest you copy the case manager, just so that they're always in the loop. They're keeping on top of things. They're collecting data for that IEP and so forth. Consider the related service providers. That would be your school psychologist, the nurse, the speech teacher, and what they may need to know, and that's specific to their role. So again, if there's things that you want to communicate in advance to any of those, that's fine. Don't leave them out if there's something important they should know. Be open-minded. Start the school year kind of with an open mind if you can. While things might not have gone well last year, give your teacher this year a chance to try new strategies or to adapt techniques to fit your child's needs. Partner with your teacher together to come up with a plan when new strategies are needed. It's really important for the teacher to feel that you're partnering with them, that you're both on the same team, and that you're not just coming in with these, huge expectations without being really also responsible for some of them. So, let them know that you're coming in as a team member. Let them know that if last year was especially tough, you might have some wounds from that. And you want to overcome them, but you're going to need their help to do that. So I always, tell teachers that The loudest parents are often the most wounded parents, and that's just because, you know, sometimes things don't go well for us again and again and again. And it's really hard to be positive and to have an open mind on the new school year. But it's really important for our kids that we do try. Be positive. Your attitude matters to teachers and to your child or children. Keep your expectation high. Participate in school meeting. You know, your attitude in the IT meetings and around the school building, it's really, you know, others will follow your lead. So if you're avoiding deficit-based language as much as possible, if you're positive and helpful, if your expectations are high, others are going to respond to that. I recommend that parents participate in school meetings, get involved in the CCAT, the Special Education Community Advisory Committee, get involved in your PTA, always join your child's PTA. If there are activities at the school, band night, concert night, be visible and let those teachers and that principal know that your child is just as an important member of that school community as anybody else. So show up, get involved, go to the picnics. Even if you're only there for 10 minutes, you know, if there's a festival of some kind, be involved. It matters for your kids. It matters to the teachers and to the administrators. This year, especially as I mentioned with the staffing challenges, we need there to be some time for our children and the teachers to adjust. Kids are getting back into the swing of things too. There might be a lot of new faces at the school. Keep those lines of communication open as everyone settles back in. Tell teachers what is working and not just what isn't. It's really important if your child comes home and they tell you something really great that's happened, or you see a note in your child's backpack, or you know there's a special way that they got your child off the bus that was really helpful. Send a quick note of things. Send a quick note to say, this is working really great. Let's continue doing this. So quite often teachers don't hear from us until there's a problem. So consider that and keep that communication open, good times and tough times. And just acknowledge the challenges that teachers are facing this year too, as we go back. There are resources, as I said, on the Howard County Autism website. These are our back to school resources. The Family Support and Resource Center for the Howard County School System also is a great resource. They have a bunch of parent conferences coming up, and they host webinars as well. There's a parent empowerment conference that takes place in October, and that's put on by much of the Department of Special Education staff and parents as well. So that's always great to get on your calendar. And then these are just some websites that I always recommend to parents. Understood.org, as I've mentioned, that has many of these printouts that can help you get really organized. Rightslaw.com, very good for anything having to do with your legal rights. Disability Rights Maryland, they have weekly or bi-weekly Facebook Live Q&A with the attorneys there, and then Parents Place of Maryland. I also reached out to Dr. Savage and asked her for the Instructional Facilitator and Resource Teacher school assignments for the school year. This is something that she provides us each year. For many of you, you know that there is a whole stable of people within your school building that are devoted to special education, but it's important to know that outside of your school building, there's a whole department of special education in the central office that's there to support your child as well, and to support the teachers that are teaching your child. So on this list, and again, we're going to post this to our Howard County website. On this list, you'll see your school, and you can look and see who your resource teacher is, and then above them is the instructional facilitator. So if you're struggling with your teacher, if things aren't working out, if the IEP is not being implemented, if a reading program just isn't working and the staff is perplexed as to what else might be available or what other programs are working, these are all people that you can contact. You can reach out to your resource teacher. You can reach out to your instructional facilitator. I do recommend that you start at school. You start with your school staff and the principal to try to resolve things. But if you're not getting anywhere and you feel like you need a little extra help, then you may reach out to a resource teacher and instructional facilitator. But again, we want to start within our school building and bringing these resources, you know, as needed But really, we want the schools to own your child and to make those changes that are necessary first and foremost. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation. The slides will be posted tomorrow on the Howard County Autism Society website. And I have time for questions. I also want to respond to some of the questions that I received in advance. This is, of course, our contact information. And then I will leave you with my contact information at the Husband Institute for Autism. You can reach me at either one. If you want special education advocacy help, if you want to talk about your child's IEP or accommodations or have someone look at it, that's everything that I'm happy to do on behalf of the Autism Society. You would just simply get in touch with the Autism Society, with Suzanne at the Howard County Autism Society, and she will put you through to me, and then we'll schedule a time to talk. But those are all absolutely free consultations. I'm happy to help parents along the way to make sure that you know what your rights are and that you have guidance if you need it on how best to advocate for your child. We want to make you strong advocates. Our goal is not to be that voice at IEP meetings for you, but really to be that little voice in the back of your head saying, go ahead, ask for this, you can, and giving you guidance in that way. So I'm going to stop the presentation at this time. If you guys want to come on camera, we can all be in one room together. And there we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and just respond to some of the questions that I received in advance from people. But feel free, if you have other questions, once I go through some of these, if I haven't answered your question yet, then feel free to put them in chat or just raise your hand and ask them. So one of the questions that I received was, what are the best ways to ensure my child is ready for kindergarten? And what should we look for in our kindergarten program? So my advice for this is monitoring progress. So that is key for all of us, whether our child's in kindergarten or third grade or fifth grade. We need to know where our kids' strengths are now and where their needs are now at the beginning of the school year, and then monitor their progress during especially those first few weeks up to that, again, 45, 60 days. Definitely quarterly, but more often if necessary. And again, I'm going to just reiterate, we don't want to wait until the annual review to bring up concerns, to say, geez, my daughter didn't make as much progress as I thought they should have in this year. We want to get ahead of that. So don't be shy about calling an IEP meeting if you're feeling that your child is not progressing, or you feel like, something's not going well with the IEP, it's not being implemented fully. It's okay for you to ask questions. It's okay for you to say, how is that close adult support being provided during music class? Or how is it going at lunch and recess? If you have questions, they're fair for you to ask. Our kids can't come home like many others and communicate everything that happened on the playground to themselves and every other child on the playground the same way. So it's okay if you need a little help with that communication. It's not a daily thing to teachers. Remember, be respectful of those emails that you're sending. Don't inundate them with emails. But if every once in a while you want to do a check-in, that's okay. That's fair. What advice do you have for parents of children with ASD, with autism and intellectual disability? So my advice with that is don't get hung up on intellectual disabilities. So too often we pay attention to just that, and our expectations might go down a little bit. But keep in mind that the characteristics that are associated with autism make true measures of intellectual ability very difficult. Assessments rely on processing, communication, memory, recall, all the things that may be affected for someone with autism. So look for other measures of progress. We're never looking for one data source. We're never looking for one report. We're looking at multiples. We're looking at observations. We're looking at, tests, quizzes, send home things. We're looking at those teachers' communication notes. We're looking at what our child can do in our presence. What are we seeing at home? If the teacher's saying they know their colors, am I pointing out things and showing my son what is yellow and seeing if he's responding to it? We're really looking for lots of different ways to know our children are making progress. So don't get hung up on the intellectual disability part. With an intellectual disability, our children still learn. So don't ever give up those high expectations from that too. One parent asked whether they should wait for progress reports before they step in to get their child more assistance. Again, as I've said, we need to give our kids and our teachers a chance to get back into school, to just make that transition back. Teachers are going to spend that first couple weeks really assessing where kids are. Did children regress in the last year? This is all something that teachers are going to be looking at. They're going to look to make sure that they know where they're starting on their Iep goals as a point of measurement. So again, it all goes back to data collection in these first few weeks and checking in with the teacher. If you're not sure, it's okay to ask. I mentioned the interim reviews. That's great. But again, we want to give our children time to settle in and the teachers time to get to know our kids. One parent asked about accommodations, what accommodations other people have on their IEPs. Please keep in mind that your child's IEP should not look like my child's IEP. They're individualized, and accommodations are based on assessed needs. So needs that we see, needs that we have determined your child has, not on a guess that I think my child's going to need a special pencil, special pencil. I think when he's about to write, he's going to need a special pencil. If you don't know that, you can't put that on your accommodations. You really have to have an assessed need for those accommodations and program modification. So keep that in mind. If you're hearing teachers say, gee, Kyle would really benefit from a box of fidgets during circle time. Okay, how do you know that? Well, he fidgets a lot, and I gave him this toy, and he did really well. He sat for the whole book. Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and add that then as an accommodation. He should have fidgets during circle time because we've seen the benefit of it. So before we ask for a ton of accommodations, we have to know why we're asking for them and what that need is that we're hoping to address. One parent asked me about their preschoolers who do some headbanging and whether she should put helmets into school with their kids. I absolutely suggest that you do. That is fine. If they don't wear them, it's fine to put them in the backpack, but that is absolutely something you want to communicate. If there's anything special that you think may be useful for your child that you're going to put in the backpack, make sure teachers know that it's there. Those types of things, to me, those are just as important as having an EpiPen if you need one. So something like that, I would absolutely communicate to the teacher. In general education, a parent asked, who can help my child with toileting? How many hours can I demand that there be a paraeducator in the room to help my child stay on task? And who will help my child with peer interaction at school? So if you share that your child needs assistance with toileting, it should be written in the IEP. That again should be in section 3. You should have discussed some kind of a toileting schedule if there needs to be one. You should, be able to know who is assisting your child to go to the bathroom so that you can help your child understand you ask so-and-so to go, when you need to go to the bathroom, or there's some kind of sign that your child gives when he or she may need to use the bathroom. Or again, we're just taking him every hour on hour because that's what we're doing at home and that's how we're potty training, and we need that to be consistent. So something like that is serious enough that we certainly want to communicate that with the teacher, and we want to know what they're planning to do. What's your plan when it comes to this? Because that's important. So communicating with the special educator teacher about what's routine at home, what the kind are, and all that is helpful. As for demanding a special paraeducator be with your child, again, it's not a matter of I want this and you have to provide it. Post-adult support is no different than any other accommodation. So if your child needs a paraeducator next to them throughout the day, that is going to be noted in section 3. That is an accommodation. That is a supplementary aid. Again, it's based on assessed need. And it may not be for your child's entire day. Your child may only need post-adult support during academic instruction. Your child may need post-adult support on the playground and during lunch, or during specials, during music and PE. When you look at your child's IEP, which I know you're going to do this week, and you see post-adult support, you're going to want to look at specifically where it says it. So when it says post-adult support in the one box, below it is going to be a clarification statement. And it will say post-adult support is needed across the child's day and academic instruction, lunch, recess, bus, dismiss, arrival and dismissal. It will specifically say where your child needs that post-adult support. So you shouldn't guess when there's going to be additional support for your child. It's fair for you to ask the team what you can expect. But again, that has to be documented in the IEP. If you don't have data or evidence to support that your child needs that extra help, that one-on-one, another adult near them at all times, you can't demand it. So again, there has to be that need. We have to be watching for it. If we have a lot of behaviors, if we're doing a functional behavior assessment and we're determining that a child needs that additional support in order to be successful, that is something absolutely fair to talk with the IEP team and to add to that IEP. Just keep in mind that we don't want to put a ton of adult supports around our kids every moment of their day if we don't need to. We really want our kids, especially when they're young, to be able to count on their friends in the classroom, to be able to count on their peers, to hold their hand to go down the hallway to music rather than an adult. So really look for those peer supports, because what happens is when we, surround our kids with adults, it kind of prevents a barrier for other kids to be close to them. So just keep that in mind when we're asking for post-adult support. How much is enough and how much might be too much? And is it necessary at every time of the day? Is it okay to just have somebody with a watchful eye on the playground? Or is it really necessary for an adult to be right next to your child during recess at all times? So think carefully about what you're asking for and what the unintended consequence of that could be. I had one parent mention that they're concerned with the child's Iep Compliance Goal, and that they'll teach the child to mask their autism, to mask their neurodiversity, and we want children to know to self-advocate for what they need, especially when it comes to their sensory needs. So if a child needs to stim, if a child needs to flap their hands, if a child needs to rock in their chair, is that really an Iep goal that's necessary? Absolutely not. So we really want to look carefully when we're writing our kids' IEPs, and we're writing those objectives and their goals, especially when we get around to kind of these, social expectations or behaviors. What are we really addressing? Are we addressing things that are really absolutely necessary for our children to be successful? Or are we trying to make them not autistic? And if we're trying to make them not autistic, we really have to question what we're doing. That's not going to help anybody in the long run. So what are we respecting about who they are as individuals and what they might need to do? My son rocks all day long. So my son has a really great core because he is a rocker. And he's rocking when he's at work, and he's rocking when he's at home, and he's rocking when he's on his computer. He's quiet and he's self-regulated. If I were to tell him to stop rocking, what that may do to him, if you put air in a bubble and you push it one way, it's going to go somewhere else. So I'm telling you, if I cut off that rocking in one area, it's going to show up somewhere else in a different, probably worse way. So really be careful about what it is that we're looking for in terms of compliance. Talk to the teachers. This conversation requires a lot of communication and honesty. So if you, as a parent, have a philosophy about your child's autism, share that with the team. If you want your child to have identity first language, my child's autistic, my autistic son, if identity first language is important to you, share that with the team. If person first language is important to you, Kyle's a student with autism. He's a child with autism. If that's important to you, share that with the team. Okay, these are really important things for our kids, because we know adults want to know about their diagnosis, wanted to know about their diagnosis earlier. We know that putting language in front of our kids is so important for them to embrace who they are and accept who they are. And that can't happen early enough. So really, pay attention to that conversation. Don't write goals if they feel in any way harmful. to your child as a human being. We want to respect that whole person. We're not just looking for compliance for the sake of being not autistic. Okay, we really want to respect who they are. How do we get access to resources? It takes more than 5 months to get a diagnosis report after testing is completed, and then it takes a year, or it takes a year after private testing to get the results reported to the school. So this is really important for you to know the regulations around timelines. They are all assessments for an initial evaluation, so that first evaluation must be recommended and completed concurrently within the mandated timeline of 60 calendar days from receipt of parental consent. So when you sign off to say the assessment, then that has to get started. If there's a written referral, so if you as a team consent and say, I think I want to have my child evaluated for dyslexia, then there is, again, that 60 calendar days. You can always call an IEP meeting to share more recent evaluations. If you have an outside evaluation done on your own by a speech language pathologist or an OT or a full evaluation, you call an IEP meeting and you let the team know that you're going to be sharing that outside report. There is a form that the school system has to fill out. So if you have an OT evaluation done and you bring that to the IEP meeting, there will be someone, probably the program head for OT, at that meeting to evaluate whether that outside assessment is a reliable, valid assessment. You'll go over as a team the recommendations of that assessment and decide as a team which one of those recommendations or all those recommendations get pulled over into the IEP. So don't be surprised when there's a form that gets filled out. Don't be surprised when they look at your evaluation discriminatively. I mean, that's really important. We have to make sure that your child's evaluation is a good evaluation. Not every outside evaluation is a good one. So it's important that they, fill out that form with you. Let's see. Here's another good one. How do I know if my child's kindergarten goals or any goals, IEP goals, are challenging enough? Especially, if my child's non-speaking. So assessing whether goals are challenging enough or too challenging relies on that monitoring. So that routine progress monitoring, again, not once a year, but routinely. How are we doing? If we're seeing no progress, if those quarterly reports are coming home, if the interim reports are coming home and we're not seeing progress, then we need to meet as an IEP team and we need to know what's going to be done differently. So we're not going to keep doing the same thing. So if I'm seeing that my son is not making progress in reading, I'm not going to wait to the annual review. I'm going to call an IEP meeting, find out how they're teaching him in reading right now, and find out how we're going to do it differently tomorrow. Okay, so we always want to know, what are you doing now and what are we going to do differently? Because quite often we expect our kids to do all the changing. And really, it's us, whether it's us as adults, and I need to change some of the things that I'm doing at home, the way I'm talking to my child, or the expectations that I have. And as teachers, sometimes it's their strategies, their methods that need changing. We don't want to keep doing the same thing for a whole year if it's not working. In the same way that if you are getting a progress report after quarter one and your child has achieved that goal, well, yahoo, we're going to tell grandma and grandpa about it. We're going to be so excited. But if they've met that goal in the first quarter, then it wasn't ambitious enough. Because that goal is an annual goal. It's supposed to be ambitious enough for them to have something challenging, a step up from where they are, and they have a year to accomplish it. So achievements are good. I love to see that big A of achieved. Every parent does. But if you're seeing achieved, it's not, oh, this is just great. We're, are our goals ambitious enough? Should we be working on more? We all know there's lots to work on. So what else do we need to put on this IEP to work on in math? Goals can be revised if necessary. If they're, obviously not being met, and the strategy has been changed 3 times, and we just realized the goal was just too challenging for the year, that can be revised. But definitely, if they're not ambitious enough, always want to have ambitious goals for our kids. There's always questions about how we can help our kids make friends. And this goes back to what I was recommending, to get involved, to be part of that classroom. If there are opportunities, and hopefully this year there will be, whereas last year was hard. Hopefully this year, if there are opportunities for you to volunteer, do that. Sign up. Think of your child as the same as every other child in their classroom. Yes, my child was the child in the classroom with the most significant needs. In fact, he was probably the only person with autism. Again, he's 24, so remember, this was many years ago. So he was one of the only kids in his classroom with autism. So we did a lot of teaching about autism. But I always went in from kindergarten up to probably about 4th grade. I was always visible. I made sure I knew all of the kids in his class. I made sure I talked to all of the children to really let them know that I saw Kyle as a member of their class, that I wanted him to be integrated, that I wanted him to have friends, and really, bonding with other parents, getting connected to other parents, doing your part, as I said, on the PTA and Special Education Advisory Committee. All of these ways are just simple ways, to if you want your child to be included, you have to include yourself too. And that can be hard for us because I know for me, I always want to fly under the radar. Kyle got enough attention. I didn't necessarily need to be everywhere and seen, but it was really important that the school knew that I felt that and considered myself a member of that community. So I really do advise you to be visible in a positive way, not just when you're going for an IEP meeting or not just when you're meeting with the principal because something bad happened, but in a positive way. I'm stopping by school if there's an open house, if it's parent, visitation, whatever they call that, that back to school when parents can come in. Even if your child can't handle you in their classroom, so let's say it was really hard for Kyle when he was little for me to be at school because he thought if I showed up at school, I was taking him home. I would always go at the end of the day. And so that we could do that. So you wouldn't have a behavior, mom's coming in, I'm seeing the last part of the day, and then I'm going. But you know what? I was there. I showed up. My name was on the check-in list. Okay, so that's the questions that I received in advance. Suzanne, do we go? How late do we go? I
Well,
want to respect everybody's
I
time.
know we did say 7 to 8. There were just a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
The first one that came in was how long do we keep IEPs from past years?
That's up to you as a parent. I mean, I tended to keep them, quite a few years.
I still have all mine.
I definitely do not have mine now. So it was, that tiding joy, that joy of tiding or whatever that book is. And it says if it doesn't bring you joy, pitch it. Well, I was happy to pitch them all at one point. I kept this last one and that was it. But remember, what's important is that you have a track record, right? So if you're going to say, gee, my child hasn't made progress for the past 3 years, it's really important that you have that data to support that. So you definitely want to have a couple years worth of your child's IEP. Definitely, I think, to hold on to those. The evaluation data appears in your child's IEP, in that section 2, it always will have the evaluation data in there, but that you always want to hold on to that. So any assessment, any evaluation that's done, you want a folder for those, and you always want to keep that as well. And it's good too, sometimes you look back and you say, gosh, look how far we've come, from that initial evaluation, or look how these evaluations changed. So yeah, I do recommend holding on to them. I know it's not always easy, but you don't need every piece of data. You don't bring home paper, but it is really important to keep those IEPs.
There are some questions in Spanish, so I'm not sure if Sylvia can help with that, but it looks like someone is interested in maybe a one-on-one consultation for preschool, asking about the first IEP meeting and the functional behavioral assessment and planning for BIP, a behavior intervention plan.
Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about behavior intervention plans and functional behavior assessments. So if your child is really struggling at school, if you're seeing, school refusal, if your child doesn't want to go to school, or every day you pick your child up, they're crying and something's not going right, or you're getting reports home that, there was some time that your child missed instruction because they were having a meltdown or a tantrum or just having real difficulties. You don't want to wait to call in a behavior specialist. So again, remember, as I said, the Department of Special Education outside of your school building has a whole stable of people to support the school, and that's a behavior team. So each school has a behavior specialist assigned to that school. Each program, so if your child's in a specialized program, like the MINC PL or the MINC EL, there are behavior specialists assigned to those programs. So you're going to want to get their advice. You're going to want to say, my child's really struggling. Can we get ahead of this? We don't want to wait too long to get that behavior support. And so if your child does not have a behavior plan and when you're seeing a pattern of behavior, they may do what's called a functional behavior assessment. And that's exactly as it sounds. They come in and they assess the behavior. They take data on the behaviors that are happening. They make a hypothesis about why that behavior may be happening. And then, based on the data, they come up with some strategies and put that together in a behavior intervention plan. So the behavior intervention plan always has preventative strategies. So what do we need to have in place? So hopefully this behavior doesn't occur. It has educative strategies. What do we need to teach the child to hopefully reduce some of those behaviors? And then it has responsive strategies. So if our child is having a really aggressive behavior, what are we all on the same page? How are we all responding to that? So each behavior plan has those different strategies listed. Parents are involved in the functional behavior assessment. Just as any other evaluation, once complete, you'll get it 5 days ahead of your meeting. You come together as an IEP team. You decide together what is going to be put into place for your child, what's going into that behavior intervention plan, and then it's immediately implemented. Those supports that are in the behavior intervention plan, many of them will be, integrated into the IEP, but the BIP is a part of the IEP. So it's not just out there and, oh, by the way, do you have a BIP? In the school record, the IEP and the BIP are all part of your student's file. And that is on in section 2. It asks the question, has your child had a functional behavior assessment? And it gives the date. It says, does your child have a behavior intervention plan? And it'll say yes or no. I want to make sure all parents know that seclusion is no longer allowed in our schools. And so you're no longer asked whether your child can be secluded, or, there's still some students that don't have restraint seclusion on there. But we should be absolutely 100% moving away from seclusion. So as of July 1st, it's no longer allowed in our public school.
Yeah, I think
we don't have that same regulation for non.
I think the parent asking about some of those questions in Spanish perhaps can contact our office, and maybe Beth, you could follow up on some of those more specific questions they're asking. There is one other question here. I will read it out. So a child's received a diagnosis from a behavioral psychologist and an IEP meeting has been set up. Can I expect that changes will be updated for the first quarter of the school year?
So the child has a diagnosis from a psychologist, a new diagnosis.
I'm not sure if it's new. Maybe it's the first diagnosis for some condition apparently. And they've set up an IEP meeting to address that. And the question is, can they expect changes to be updated in the IEP for the first quarter of the school year?
Yeah, so one, it depends on whether the school has done their own assessment. So let's say your child has an outside assessment that says your child has dyslexia, or your child has autism, and you want to get that changed on their IEP, whatever it may be. The school may want to do their own assessment or their own evaluation, and that is fair. So they have to consider your outside they have to consider your outside evaluations. They don't absolutely have to accept all of them. And that's important to know. So I have a lot of parents that will say, but I have a Kenny finger diagnosis of autism. So keep in mind that a medical diagnosis of autism is different than educational. And what I mean by that is that, I could have ADHD, for instance. If it doesn't affect me in school, if I, have accommodations in place and I'm not having a really challenging time, then I wouldn't necessarily put ADHD on my IEP. Okay, so an educational impact. So your child may be autistic, but that may not be what affects their education. What affects their education is dyslexia. And so dyslexia is their disability, not autism. It may say that your child has a medical diagnosis of autism as well, but for that child's educational disability, it would be other health impairment or dyslexia. Does that make sense? Or I'm sorry, FLD for dyslexia, sorry. Other health impairment for ADHD.
There was a follow-up. Are you done? Sorry. There was
So
a
I'm
follow-up.
sorry, whether that will be implemented by Q1, I do think that when we bring outside evaluations in and the team looks at them, if there are strategies that are going to be helpful in Q1, I cannot imagine that a team would not use them. So teachers are people too. So if you came to me and said, putting a blue shirt on Kyle every day is going to make him happy, then I would put a blue shirt on him, whether it's written in a document that I have to do it or not. So I think if there are strategies that make a lot of sense, and that are going to work, then the team would be open to those before they are finalized. But what you can require of them, that has to be in the IEP. So I can't say for sure they would be in Q1. It really depends on when you have that IEP meeting. It depends on that outside evaluation. It depends on whether the school has done any evaluations of their own.
There was a follow-up. Sorry, there was a follow-up. I guess the question is whether the school, I think the question is whether the school system works with the outside evaluation or whether they decide not to.
Generally, the school system will do their own evaluation. The school system will want their own in-house people to make sure that they're seeing the same thing that the outside evaluators are. Again, they have to consider outside evaluation. They don't have to accept them.
Okay. I think there's one other one, and it looks like someone who would like to get their child diagnosed or assessed for autism. The child's 3 years old. So
right. So the school system can do that if you suspect any disability. You would simply, for children that are 3 and older, that would be through the county diagnostic. If your child is already in the school system, then it would simply be going to your child's case manager and letting them know that you want to have them evaluated for autism, that you suspect autism and you want that evaluation done. If your child is not yet in the school system, then it's calling the child find office. Child find office. Every county has a child find office. It's part of the Office of Early Intervention in each school system. And if you suspect a disability, then they will do an evaluation of your child. And that, of course, is all.
All right, we have another question came in about evaluations. I'm just going to read it. I haven't read the whole thing. When there are multiple parts, occupational therapy, speech, educational, psychological, and they are completed at different times, when can the parents or the IEP team see the results from those sections that are completed?
So generally, again, you have that timeline of 60 days. So generally, they don't have to send things home. It really depends on the team. Some team will send home the reports when they've completed them. Others will wait and you'll get a whole packet of reports all at one time. What's important to keep in mind is that you have to receive them before your IEP meeting to discuss them. So you have a right to any document, whether it's an evaluation or a progress report. You have a right to any document that's going to be discussed at the IEP meeting. You have a right to receive that 5 days before 5 school days before the IEP meeting. Okay, so if I have a speech assessment done, then 5 days before the IEP meeting, I should get that written report. And the reason why is for parental participation. It's those meetings, there should never be a surprise at a meeting. Any data that's going to be shared with you should be shared in advance so that you feel prepared for it. So if you ever feel like you have been knocked off your feet by something that a team is sharing with you, I recommend you pause that meeting and you ask for the data to support whatever that conversation is going to be. And then you ask for it to be rescheduled because you need time to understand it. And you need time to have your opinion on it and your questions. So again, you shouldn't walk into an IEP meeting with a surprise for a team. I always advise parental input before an IEP meeting, 5 days before the IEP meeting. If you have a list of questions, send them in advance. If IEP meetings are not meant to be gotchas on either side of the table. Okay, we really want to do everything that we can to create that team, that real team atmosphere. And so again, anything to be discussed at a meeting should be seen by other side in 5 days.
I don't think there are any new questions, and I hope that I have caught all of them. So they seem to only be coming to me, most of them.
I don't
You can't see them.
That's okay. I put in the chat box the info at howardautism.org. If you're interested in speaking to me directly, just email Suzanne at that address, and she'll get some information, background information for me, and then I'll reach out and set up a time to talk with you. But I thank everybody for attending tonight. I hope the information has been helpful, that there's some tip that you took away from tonight that's going to ease your anxiety about the school year ahead. And I'm happy to stay on until 8:30 if anybody has any questions or wants to chat. Feel free to type in here. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Yeah, people are showing appreciation. Thank you so much, Beth. If no one has questions, and I'm not. Oh, yes, the survey. If you could complete the survey for us and send that along, it should just take a couple minutes. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, very good. Okay, Beth, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate
thank you very much. I'll send you the presentation as a PDF so that you can post that. And
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, then I think I will end the meeting.
okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.